Hey everybody, welcome back to another Scratch tutorial. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to create your own Space Invader game. Now I'm going to give you a quick preview of something I've been working on. I'm just going to get the game started. Okay, well that is the game. So let's kind of break it down and get you started on how this all works. Now, the game that I've created, the way it's designed, it's like your typical, not a typical Space Invader game, but the idea is that you have an aircraft or a player one who's scrolling left and right on the screen, which can fire a beam with the space bar, and that beam will hit one of these objects. Now, this player has hit points, or rather HP, a life bar, and when they're hit by a character, they lose life, right? When they're hit by an enemy. You also gain points when you strike an enemy. Now, when you're hit too much, you lose multiple HP, and once your value goes under 0, you essentially lose the game, which is the game over. So, there's a lot of things we got to cover in this particular segment, so we're going to just take a look at it. So, this is the game, and the different sprites that I'm using. I don't think I use that at all. But you are going to require a rocket ship, you're going to create a beam, and you're going to want to create 3 different sprites, which are your enemies in this tutorial. So I'm going to start by going and creating a new file. And when you make a new file, you're introduced to your typical cat. I'm just going to select the cut tool or the delete tool up here and just delete the cat. I don't need the cat at all. The next step is I need to set my stage. Let's start there. My stage is on here on the left hand side. I'm going to pick a backdrop from a library. Now, depending on the assignment that you have, I may ask you to create all these different elements, but for the sake of time, to make things easier, I chose this space background called space under the theme space and clicked OK. So now I have my background. Before I even continue, I'm going to name this Space Invader project, and you're going to want to do the same thing. Just make sure you're saving it throughout to ensure that you are good. Now here on my backdrops, I have 2 backdrops. I'm going to delete the first one by clicking on it and pressing X. Okay. I'm also going to create a second backdrop. Just click that new backdrop, and I'm going to select my text tool, and I'm just going to say game over. Right, that's our game over screen. Okay. To move the text after you finish typing it, I usually click away on the left hand side, and the little hand will come around for me to change that. But I'm going to click back on space. That's always important. And a script that I'm going to enable is if I click here under scripts while the stage is selected, I'm going to click the events, select my flag. When green flag is clicked, the look option should say switch to backdrop 1, which is the space backdrop. Okay, makes life a bit easier there. So that ensures that whenever I start the game, that backdrop will appear. The next thing is I need my character. The character is the most essential thing in there. I created my character in Adobe Illustrator, and I'm probably going to ask you to do that as well. But so what I'm going to do now is under sprites, I'm going to import that file. Hopefully it's somewhere there. Here we go. So I saved that as a PNG file from Adobe Illustrator, and so it's transparent. I'm going to click OK and open it up. And I suggest you make one that's a little more exciting looking. That's just my suggestion for you. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to position my rocket ship to a location, and I'm going to shrink it down a bit. It's a little too big. I'm going to select the shrink tool and shrink down the ship. That looks good, and I'm going to move it again a little lower. Now, when I move my mouse, you can see the x-axis point here. This value changes, and it looks like -12 and -130 is a good spot to be in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set an event that every time I start the game, my ship has to start at a specific location. If you don't do that, what will happen is the spaceship will stop wherever the game had ended, which you don't want. So let's see here. When clicked, motion, I want it to go to, depending on where you place the object, this will automatically, this value, this block here will automatically place that. And there's one thing I have to do is I have to select the show option. I'm going to put it right above it. And there's a reason for that. I think that should be good. We'll find out in just a little bit. Let me see. I'm going to move it up here. I'm going to press the green box. Okay. That's good. That tells us we already have an issue. So when we made that first backdrop, now there's two things that happen. We have our backdrop, our space background, and our game over background. I'm going to call this game over. This backdrop, we need to apply a script to it. And that script is similar to what we've done before. When clicked, switch to space, which is the first background. Okay, so make sure you do that change. I know it was a little confusing. Click on the game over backdrop we created, go to script, make sure when you bring the event controller, when click, switch to backdrop, space. That'll ensure that when we press this, we begin there. Alright, now let's start looking at the rocket ship. Let's click on the rocket ship, and we're going to start working with the controls and the motion that deals with the rocket ship. And I'm going to explain a more advanced motion control for this rocket ship a little later. What we're going to do is we're going to select the block when this space key is pressed, or whenever this key is pressed, an action will occur. For the most part, we're only going to go left and right on the keyboard. So when I press the left arrow, something will happen, and when I press the right arrow, something will happen. Now, as far as the motion's concerned, I'd like to change the X by a certain amount. We'll go with that first, right? We're going to go X-axis goes horizontally across the board, right? So we'd like this left arrow to go a negative value because 0, 0 is right here in the middle. So we wanted to go -10. And then we're going to select another change X here. And we're going to leave it at +10. Press the check mark or the flag. And if we move the keyboard keys, we'll now see that our rocket ship moves left and right. Very basic setup for our space shuttle or rocket ship. The next thing we need to do is actually create the firing beam that will attack the enemy. So I'm going to click on down here on the sprites, click on paint a new sprite. What we're going to do is just paint a red dot. It could be a different color, whichever color works for you. I'm just going to draw a line like so, just like that. And I'm going to rename it and call it beam. Change the name up here, go back to my scripts. Now you're going to notice is this little beam here, we want it to fire when we press the space bar. So we're going to create the script on the beam, and I'm going to change the name on this as well. If you click on the sprites, you can click the little eye option. I'm going to call this beam to match the other one there. I'm going to go back. Alright, so make sure you name those, it'll help you out. Now, next step is select the script, beam, script option. We're going to set this event option called when clicked, we are going to hide the beam. You're like, well, why would you want to do that? Well, obviously the beam has not fired yet. Now, the next thing we need to do is apply in another event. When we press the space bar, we want to show the beam, and we want it to start. So we're going to use a motion here. We want it to go to our rocket ship. We want it to originate there. And we're going to do a loop here. We're going to repeat this option, and we're going to change, well, before we do that, what I want to do is when I press the space bar, I want the beam to fire and change in the y-axis. So I'm going to change the y value by a certain value, like let's say 10, but let's test this code out. Okay. When I press the space bar, you'll notice that the beam kind of just fires, but it doesn't go anywhere, right? So that means we need to do something, and that is we're going to apply a repeat loop. I wanted to repeat this action a certain amount of times, and a good value here is about 40. So it's going to repeat this change y by 10 40 times. Now when we apply the spacebar, you'll see that the beam now does fire across the screen. Okay. And that's it for this first tutorial. If this is the end of what you're doing, I suggest that you make sure you name your project, go to File, Save Now, and continue on with the next tutorial, which will look at putting enemies in your project.